All right, John, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday morning for the third PAC meeting for the I-95 Stamford PEL. My name is John Dean. For those of you whom I haven't met before, I'm the project manager from Connecticut DOT. And as we mentioned, we have a busy agenda, so I'll just get right into it. If you could go to the next slide, please. So a little bit of housekeeping. As you probably saw the notice, we are recording this meeting, and we'll post the recording on the website along with a summary when that is available. We are going to be posting the presentation file on the website as well, and we will be including things like alt text to make it more accessible. So the ways you can join this video conference, are to call in via phone or to join via Teams. And we do ask that when we have discussion periods, if you could please raise your hand, and we'll call on you to either ask a question or give your comment, or you can always type any questions and comments into the chat as we go along, and we'll answer those when we can. So as a reminder, the Connecticut DOT study team, Mike Calabrese is the Division Chief of Highway Design. Neil Patel is the Principal Engineer of the Major Highways Unit. Again, I'm the project manager, and Joe Belrose is our project engineer. And you'll be hearing from myself this morning, and we have Emily Valentino, who's the project manager from Stantec, who's the prime consulting firm. We have Najma Jami, who's the traffic engineering lead, Ralph Denisko, who's the multimodal mobility lead, and Marcy Miller, who's the community engagement lead from FHI Studio. So I think just in the interest of time, we won't go through all the members who are joining us for introductions this morning, but again, thank you for being here. And if and when you do ask any questions or provide any comments, if you could just, the first time we hear from you, just please identify yourself and the organization that you represent. So this morning's agenda, we'll give you an update on our progress so far under the study. We'll go over again the draft preliminary purpose and need that we discussed last time. And then we'll get into some of the universe of alternatives that we're looking at under the study, some conceptual mainline solutions, and the approach that we're taking on the local roads. And then we'll talk about the next steps moving forward in the study and the schedule. We'll break throughout for discussion, so you won't have to wait till the end, but certainly we'd like to leave room at the end for any other discussion that comes up, and then we'll adjourn. So with that, I will hand the floor over to Emily.
Thank you, John. So as John mentioned, we'll start with a study update. What have we done since the last time we spoke? So we had a pop-up event, as well as we've been doing ongoing study analysis. So we have refined the purpose and need that we showed you last time. We submitted the needs and deficiencies report. We've been collaborating with agencies on local roadways. We've also gone into the site with them. And the focus of today's presentation will be the next two bullets: universe of alternatives and conceptual solutions development. So we'll get into the details of that in a moment. But we'll start by just looking at a schedule. Where are we now? February 1st. We have a public workshop in about 2 weeks, and that will review the purpose and needs and deficiencies, however, much higher level than we showed you last time, and a brief review of the universe of alternatives. Throughout the whole process, we have been working on, and we will continue to work on, the alternatives development, evaluation, and screening process. And we'll be preparing the PEL study report, and then issuing a final PEL study report in 2025. Throughout this whole process, we will have more public workshops and community engagement. So let's start by just reorienting ourselves. Study corridor. Interchanges 6 to 9 on the I-95 mainline, and again, Bridge 32 is the impetus for this PEL study. We've also expanded the study area to include the Stamford local roadways, and that is north and south of the I-95 main line, including North and South State Street, going up to Tresser Boulevard in the north and South State Street in the south, and a little bit south of that. So what's our study approach? How does a Pell study work? So we've talked about in the past existing conditions. So you identify the existing conditions and the project challenges and constraints. Those are those needs and deficiencies. What we'll talk about today really focuses on steps 2, 3, and 4. So establishing that draft preliminary purpose and need, that's the project justification. Establishing a high level and reasonable universe of alternatives, which you can think of that as a menu of items to consider. And then considering project studies and input from agencies and the public, we then develop conceptual solutions. That's what we'll talk about today. And then in the future, we would combine those conceptual solutions to form project alternatives, and that's where the refinements and screening comes in, and then recommending final alternatives. So let's do another purpose and need review. We're continuing to refine the purpose and need statement throughout the early stages of this process. And here's a reminder of what goes into the purpose and need. So we have goals and objectives of the study, transportation deficiencies in the study area and then on the corridor, as well as public and agency input. And those are all considered when developing this purpose and need statement. So you'll see, here's the draft preliminary purpose and need. There are no material changes since the last meeting. So as a recap, this is the primary purpose and need, which is 1, to improve mobility along the I-95 corridor, and 2, to improve the crossings of I-95 over the Metro North Railroad and Myrtle Avenue. And that's, of course, Bridge 32. So all of the final alternatives that we recommend from the study must satisfy this primary purpose and need statement. And other desirable outcomes of the project, also known as secondary purpose and need. So these are still part of the purpose and need statement. 1, increase mobility for all users in the local roadway network within the study area, and that includes the portals under I-95. And the second bullet is new since the last meeting. We added it based on feedback from this group, so thank you. And that's to enhance the cross connection of communities adjacent to I-95. Third bullet, improve transportation facilities to provide opportunities for transportation choice, that's buses, bicycling, for example, and also ease of use for local communities, and that includes traditionally underserved communities. And finally, reduce the impacts during construction. And while our mainline alternatives are not required to satisfy these tenets, we're still studying and recommending improvements for the local roadways, which Ralph will explain more on in a moment. So again, to reiterate, previous slide, please. The primary purpose and need focuses on the I-95 main line and will include recommendations relating to improving I-95 bridge crossings, mainline operations, and connections to and from the local roadways. And if any mainline alternative does impact the local roadways, we will study and mitigate those adverse impacts on the local roadways and recommend improvements. The secondary purpose and need, which complements the primary, will focus on the local roadways and with recommendations around connecting communities and improving transit accommodations. Of course, safety is in both of these buckets, so it's both primary and secondary. Okay, next slide. So again, just to reorient, the primary purpose and need focuses on longer term projects, and those will evolve around mainline ramps and North and South State Street improvements. The secondary purpose and need, those are going to focus on more shorter term projects, and those are the smaller spot improvements to the local roadways. So we can show that in a timeline on the next slide. So just reiterating that the breakout short-term projects on the local roads will occur before the long-term alternative projects. All right, universe of alternatives. So now that we've re-reviewed the purpose and need, the next step in the Pell process is to come up with a universe of alternatives. And as I mentioned, that's kind of like a menu of items that Najma will describe now. Najma?
Thank you. So as Emily mentioned, one of the initial steps in our project process is setting up a universe of alternatives. You can think of this as brainstorming realm, where we toss in various transportation improvement ideas and concepts that could potentially be feasible solution for our project study area. This served as a toolbox for us to evaluate different options and look at which one could be feasible for this study area. And then we'll screen them to identify the most workable and feasible solution, and ultimately determining the final alternatives for our project. This step is also required under NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, for any comprehensive environmental impact assessment studies. So for us, by tackling this now, we are actually giving ourselves a head start for the next phase of this project. It is also important to note that the initial list includes a wide range of options, and not all of these options necessarily meet a primary purpose and need for this project. So as we ventured into creating our universe of alternatives, we assembled a matrix, which, as you can see on this slide, includes 5 major categories of transportation improvements: no build, transportation demand management, transportation system management, mass transit, and improving existing corridors. Each of these categories is a collection of diverse options and concepts for us to consider. And as I said, although not every options meet the purpose and need of this project, they could still serve as a valuable complementary feature to improve overall mobility within our transportation network. And in the following slides, we're just going to go through each of these categories to look at some practical examples of how this could actually look like.
Thank you.
So let's look at the first 2 categories. No build. This concept is pretty simple. The project does not advance, and we continue with ongoing maintenance. Second one, transportation demand management. This approach is about reducing overall demand on our transportation network. And it's just not infrastructure improvement for vehicular modes, but also exploring strategies that can offer more sustainable travel options, from park and ride facilities to encouraging alternative modes of transportation, such as cycling, walking, and carpooling, and implementing high occupancy vehicle and express lane. Then moving to the next category, transportation system management, or TSM. TSM represents strategies that aim to optimize the existing transportation network using approaches that make a better use of what we already have, rather than expanding on our roadway or building new infrastructure. The way it does that, it focuses on approaches which utilize real-time traffic condition data to make dynamic decisions to improve traffic flow. So, for example, ramp metering, as you can see on this slide, is one example of TSM. This involves the use of traffic signals at freeway on-ramps to control the rate at which vehicle enters the main line. So by controlling that entry of cars based on current traffic conditions on the main line, it actually helps to minimize bottleneck and alleviate some of the congestions on the main line, and also enhance safety. Next one, mass transit. Under this category, we delve into approaches to enhance transit infrastructure. We consider options to improve the efficiency of public transportation, which could also contribute to a more sustainable and accessible transportation network. We can consider concepts on a larger scale, such as introducing or expanding bus, streetcars, or rail services, or on a more localized levels, these improvements could include implementing a dedicated bus lane or upgrading bus stations for a better experience for transit users and encourage more people to actually choose public transportation. Final category that we included in our universe of alternative focuses on improving existing corridors relevant to both mainline and local roadways. Let's look at the concept for the mainline first. As we all know, a key driver of this project, could we go back to the last one? key driver of this project is to improve the efficiencies of Bridge 32. And while we consider concepts and solutions to improve that bridge, we are also looking at the ways that can be combined with those solutions to not only facilitate the reconstruction or improvement of the bridge, but also improve overall mobility along I-95 mainline corridor within our study area. This can be achieved by various ways, such as reconstructing portions of the I-95 corridor in Stanford. We can also consider ways to improve existing features of the mainline, such as the efficiencies of the curvature and side distance, and improving local roadway connection to round terminal. Now we can see how some of these concepts could actually look like. For example, constructing express lane is one method to consider to improve capacity of the main line by providing designated lane for drivers with longer distance trips. This can be achieved as either an elevated express way that you can see on the left, or as an option that is at grade express lane, which is in the middle of the current alignment of I-95 main line. Another example within this category is construction of a tunnel. While you can see on the right, a tunnel can provide extra space above for local roadway network to be utilized for various purposes, such as green space or pedestrian plaza. We can also see on the left that it demands significant space and right-of-way during construction. Now let's talk about concepts that we consider in our universe of alternatives to improve existing corridors, but this time within local roadways network. For local roadway improvement, we aim to explore options that reflect the needs and preference of local communities to create an inviting environment for every user. That's why we have these conversations. We consider concepts which improve safety, efficiency, and mobility of the transportation network. And some of these concepts would be by optimizing the interchanges where the round terminal intersect with local roadways. We can also look at enhancing underpasses to accommodate various modes of transportation, such as pedestrians, cyclists, and improving community connectivity. We look at ways to improve lighting and clearance of those underpasses also. We seek opportunities to promote various transportation choices to make local communities, especially the underserved one, more accessible. And of course, we look at ways to improve and enhance safety, such as traffic calming measures. So now we are looking at some visual examples of how these concepts, some of them could look like. Let's think of Tresor Boulevard and some of the intersection along that, which are pretty similar to what we see on this slide. One way of improving our local road is by bringing its current features up to standard, such as upgrading the striping and building more visible elements, as you can see on this photo. With this approach, we can enhance safety and efficiency by making the most of the existing infrastructure. Here's another example that we can transform pedestrian crossing by introducing a more standardized refuge and mid-block crossing. And these simple improvements could make it safer and more comfortable for people to walk along and cross the roadway. Another example that you can see on this slide shows how improving local roadway could look like by, you can see a cycle track that is well designed and separated from vehicle lanes, providing a safer and more enjoyable environment for various modes of transportation modes. This slide also show an example of how a complete street could look like. You can see how sidewalks are separated from roadway by trees. There are proper lighting and curb extension as a measure of traffic calming, and all these provide a safer and more enjoyable environment for all users. And as we've seen through this section, there are, if you could go back to the last slide, these are just some of the examples from a broad range of concepts within our universe of alternative. And as we consider this concept, we dive deeper into evaluating and analyzing which solutions that are not only imaginable, but also feasible and workable for our study area. And Ralph later on is going to talk about our approach and how we screen these options for local roadways. But there is one that I wanted to mention on this slide because it's related. In our approach, we will take into account current projects and also guideline and design criteria. And this slide, as you can see, talks about complete street, which actually resonates with the latest Conduct Complete Street design criteria that encourages all projects to focus on improving paths and bikes and transit facilities to provide a stronger intermodal transportation network and also enhance safety. So with that, I'd like to pause if there's any question for this section. If not, I'll pass it back on to Emily.
I don't see any hands raised, Najma, so maybe
Okay.
we'll just move on to Ralph and, people can always ask questions at the end.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Well, as I begin, I would love it to be interactive. So I'll be showing conceptual mainline solutions that are specific to our project study area. So if you have any questions, thoughts, these are just our initial thoughts about conceptual solutions. So this isn't the final list. Would love to hear what you all think about this. Oh, you can go forward. You're going backward. All right, let's get into it.
Apologies, my computer just freaked out on me.
That's okay. Phil has his hand up though. Hi, Phil.
All right, Phil.
It took me a while to find out how to raise my hand. I'm actually blind. I have a quick question. I appreciate all the presentation. I may have missed the first couple of minutes trying to log on. But with respect to the pedestrian right-of-way and travel, you mentioned some options with sidewalks being parallel to the corridor and having them perhaps separated by trees. I always look at the things via the perspective of accessibility. And I just want to make sure that this is part of the project built into the equation, not after the fact, when we make sure if we are planting trees on the sidewalks, they're not encroaching into the pedestrian right of way. We see many of this in the city of Stamford now where, tree limbs are at face level, which we've smashed into. And, how does this get trickled into the formula where if we are planting trees, we make sure that they are the right kind of trees that don't come up and raise the sidewalk or provide trip hazards, or again, impeding into pedestrian right of way as a protruding object.
Yeah, I can just address that. Thank you, Phil,
Sure.
for the comment. So yeah, that's something that I suppose will be a detail that will be looked at in design, but that is certainly something the designers will have to consider is appropriate species and placement of those trees. As you mentioned, we can't restrict the walking area. We have to meet the PROAG requirements, which are the standards that we meet for sidewalk width for accessibility. So part of that will also be the future maintenance of those plantings. So there is sort of every aspect of the project life cycle here. But those are things we take into consideration.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I found that, yes, we have these standards and rules and laws with respect to pedestrian right of ways, but generally when the people with the shovel start doing the work, they typically are not aware of such standards and requirements. So how can we assure that this is specifically detailed or mentioned in any plan or work or contract? And I'm hoping that can be done.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I know for state administered contracts, we do have inspectors that are on site and make sure the contractor is constructing the facilities to plan. And the same would go if the city is holding the contract as well. They would have somebody on site that would be ensuring the contractor is following the plans and installing
No
things
comment.
appropriately.
I find that does not happen very often, unfortunately, but I'll harp on that as we go along through the process. But thank you, appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. You can go back one. So just to introduce what is a mainline or what is a conceptual solution? Najma just described the universe of alternatives. Again, it's like a menu of items. So now we'll look at specific locations and what are the specific needs at that location? What from the universe of alternatives would address those needs? So examples could include bridge rehabilitation or replacement, adding lanes or widening shoulders to increase capacity or to accommodate weaving, reconfiguring I-95, shifting entrances or ramp locations, improving interchange designs, and improving connections to North and South State Street. So let's reorient ourselves. Baseline conditions. This is what's out there today. This is southbound I-95. We're showing the on-ramps from Atlantic Street and Washington Boulevard. In general, an on-ramp tends to cause congestion, specifically here during the peak hour. It does cause congestion. So on-ramps, vehicles are coming onto the main line. Vehicles on the main line either have to slow down or merge over into another lane to accommodate and allow those oncoming vehicles onto the main line. When you put two ramps like this, so close together, these are 900 feet apart, it just exacerbates that problem. So there's more slowing down, more merging, and more brake lights. So how could we improve this? Well, our first conceptual mainline solution that we'll show today is, drum roll, next slide, please. You can go to the aerial.
Did it not go to the next slide for you?
It went you skipped 2 slides. Yes. So, so what if we combine those on-ramps before they enter the main line? So no changes to the local roadway network. You'll still have an on-ramp from Atlantic Street. You'll still have an on-ramp from Washington Boulevard. But the on-ramp from Atlantic Street will continue parallel to I-95, merge with the Washington Boulevard ramp before it enters the main line. So you'll, in essence, be removing one of those merge points and on-ramps onto the main line, which will help alleviate congestion. There'll be less merging that vehicles have to do, less friction in general. We can show that here graphically on the next slide. You can see the black dotted arrow onto the southbound lanes. That would be no longer, that would be removed. And the entrance ramp from Atlantic Street continues next to the I-95 main line, merging with that Washington Boulevard on-ramp. We can also look at this in terms of off-ramps. Again, off-ramps tend to cause congestion. Sometimes, for instance, if a vehicle is in the quote-unquote fast lane or the innermost lane, the left lane, and they want to get off, they have to merge over 2 or 3 lanes to get to the exit. That, of course, any sort of merging will create congestion. So one of the conceptual solutions would be combining the 2 off-ramps that exist today. So currently there's an off-ramp to Elm Street and there's an off-ramp to Canal Street. What if that is just one off-ramp, one exit point from Elm Street? So that's at interchange 8 there. It could be a 2-lane off-ramp to accommodate the added vehicles. And again, no changes to the local road. So you'd still have an off-ramp to Elm, you'd still have an off-ramp to North State Street, but the ramp would run parallel again to I-95 as it approaches Canal Street. This alternative or conceptual solution, pardon me, also aims to realign the I-95 main line. You can see the gray lines behind. There's currently that curve on the main line. So that can contribute to congestion. Yes, thank you. That can contribute to congestion as vehicles are turning the corner. Maybe there's not great sight distance. So a straight path for vehicles is always safer. Realignment of the main line also has the added benefit of helping to facilitate any work that will be done at Bridge 32, as it's noted here. So we have to consider the complexity of this bridge, including how construction staging might be achieved as we develop our design concepts. Again, please chime in if anybody has thoughts. Next conceptual solution in general would be to reconfigure interchanges. This on the screen showing interchange 9. So the loop ramp approaching the northbound main line from exit 9 currently has poor sight distance. It's also around a curve. So removing that loop ramp and including a reconfigured ramp entrance, a slip ramp, perhaps, for example, would improve safety at this location and could also improve mainline operations. This isn't the only interchange reconfiguration, of course, that we will look at, but it's just an example that we are looking at alternative solutions at each interchange. Najma mentioned earlier express lanes. This is an example of an elevated express lane, and this would accommodate longer distance trips. As we know today, if somebody is traveling from, for example, New Haven down to New York City, they're not going to Stamford, but some people do exit the main line and use North State Street to try to escape some of the traffic on I-95. So in order to prevent people from doing that, we could make elevated express lanes for those longer distance trips. So there would be general purpose lanes for people that want to go to and from Stamford, and then the express lanes for the longer distance. Express lanes could also be at the same grade as I-95, which is shown in the next slide. So express lanes would be separated most likely with a barrier, again, to accommodate those longer distance trips and prevent them from exiting onto North and South State Street to bypass the congestion. Now Ralph will go into our approach for the, oh, hello, Angelo. See your hand up.
Hi, good morning. Angelo from People Friendly Stamford. I just wanted to ask a little bit more about those alternatives that or conceptual solutions that you suggested before we move on to talk about the local roadways. Of course, my camera's just got out of focus now, so that's cool. For the first one you showed talking about configuring the sort of southbound on-ramps, if you could go back to that. I wanted to ask what the impact on that would be to North State Street, because presumably you would have to sort of extend it further north to accommodate the longer on-ramp. And I also wanted to ask on that alternative or conceptual solution about the on-ramp onto from Washington Boulevard southbound. You said you wanted to widen that to 2 lanes, which is currently 1 right now. And I just wanted to say that that already sounds like a one that I guess we would be opposed to, just because crossing Washington Boulevard already is a nightmare. I'm sure you guys have already heard about numerous people in our community who have died over recent years doing this. And so the idea of taking a crossing on Washington Boulevard, which is already one of the most frequently trafficked streets for pedestrian and cyclists, and widening it further seems, especially in the heart of downtown, seems like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, Angelo. I don't know, Marcy, can you go back a couple more slides? Or maybe to this one. Is this what you're referring to, Angelo? So North State Street?
It was actually the first one that you had shown, talking about consolidating the on-ramps at Washington Boulevard and Atlantic Street onto I-95 southbound, this one.
Yep, got it. Okay. Yeah, at this point, we're just kind of tossing out some examples of the types of things we'll be looking at, but definitely appreciate your feedback on them.
And to add on to what John said, we haven't studied this from a traffic perspective. So when we do come up with final recommended alternatives, we will have analysis results to show what those impacts are.
Emily, we have one more hand raised from Francis.
Hi, thank you. I just paste into the chat an interesting guide from FHWA looking at, you probably already have alternative designs for freeway merge and diverge. And I don't know if you've looked at the actual mechanics of the merge and diverge yet, but they have some interesting, they've been used well in the UK, split merges and diverges. They can help address backups and lead to more seamless merging. The other issue that wasn't addressed earlier was in ensuring mobility. We do need to consider the vehicle mix on 95 and the huge volume of freight going through the city and making accommodations for that. And I know that does cause challenges when you have speed variances because of the different driving mechanics of heavy trucks.
Yeah, that's definitely a major concern there, especially with the hills and the grade. So thank you.
All right. I don't see any more hands raised, so perhaps I think Ralph is next. Oh, wait. Oh, it's just someone coming into the meeting. All right, Ralph, I think you're next. Let me get to where you are.
Sure thing. I am Nick. And good morning, everybody. Ralph Tedisco. I may have seen some of you on a previous meeting, but probably not all of you. I co-lead Stantec's Urban Places Mobility Group. Here, we're integrated mobility planners, and we're focusing here on the local roadways approach. And as Emily showed you, we're going further than a normal Pell here with complementary local roadways analysis. I'm going to talk here about our approach to that, and really how this is above and beyond, because we're looking beyond just the adjacent impacts from mainline changes, some of which you just kind of discussed. If you move this ramp, it has this impact. We need to widen this. We need to shrink this. Those obviously have a direct impact on the local streets. I think we're going to build from that and be a little bit more broad here. So if you can go to the next slide, Marcy. There's really two buckets of kind of how we're looking at this, and I'll describe them each further. On the left-hand column is really about the plans and designs, like actual physical changes and recommendations for physical things that we'll be making here, operational things as well, things like turn restrictions and such. But and that really takes place in a three-step process. The first is just cataloging all of the things that are already going on, things that are planned, things that are in design, things that are in construction, things that are approved, maybe not built yet, and just making sure we understand all of those things. I'll talk about that on the next slide. Don't advance yet. And then the second is there are some specific places where we're going to be developing concept design level improvements. I'll list those. They're listed here. I've got another slide where we'll talk about them in a little bit more specifics. And then we combine those and develop network plans by mode, where we'll essentially show, based on all the things you're doing and all the things that we're recommending, here's a bike map, here's a transit map, here's a ped map, here's a traffic map, safety map, and kind of identify the gaps. Like, what are we missing? What are the pieces that we need to still understand, or that become obvious kind of recommendations, but they'll happen more at a plan level than at a design level. And then all of that is kind of informed by and will inform kind of goals and policy recommendations. So obviously things that are already adopted goals and policies by the city, by CONDOT, by others that align with this process. We're going to make sure that all of our recommendations are certainly congruent with those goals and policies, and where those things may need to evolve, or we may need to say, based on what we're trying to achieve here, we recommend the following kind of minor policy change, or we're adding a goal because we're looking a little bit more deeply. I think those are things we're also going to be doing as part of this kind of overall approach. And I'm going to highlight on the next two slides, just 1 and 2 as they're shown here. But this is essentially what we're going to be doing over the next few months alongside the mainline analysis. So if you can go to the next slide, Marcy. So this is those ongoing improvements, and maybe we've captured everything. Hopefully we have. If we're missing things, this is exactly the kind of feedback that we want. All the improvements, again, that are underway, approved in design and construction and planning. We're trying to map here. We have much more detail on all of these. This is just a kind of summary map. And we're going to be looking at things like, where do those lane markings match up? What are the signal time? All the kind of pieces of these. And we don't want to interrupt or contradict the hard work that's already gone into this, probably by many of the folks on this meeting. We just want to make sure we're understanding it, documenting it, so that it becomes a basis for the additional things we're going to look at here. And maybe where we can connect some gaps. And if you go to the next slide, then there are 5 specific focus areas that this process will take, as I said, to that kind of design concept level. And they're listed here. They're shown on the map: Tresser Boulevard, East Main Street, the area around the Exit 9 interchange, Elm Street, especially where it goes under I-95, and then connections around Washington Boulevard. So that's not to say we won't look at other things. It is to say we are going to look at these things much more specifically and come up with some real concept level recommendations. And just as I said, those will be fully cognizant of all local and state and project goals and policies. And of course, understanding how all these fit into the overall process. Various mainline alternatives may beg a different kind of treatment for any of these areas. That's the kind of thing we'll be sort of looking at as well. So that's kind of the approach of where we're at. We're not showing you all the detail behind this. It's in the existing conditions report and all the other analysis that we've done. We've shown you some of that, and that's going to continue to exist and inform. But that's our approach here. And I think with that, I turn it back to Marcy.
All right, we are wrapping up. So we're on a good schedule, and we never want to spend more of your time than we need to, but I just do want to talk about what our next steps are and what our schedule is. So Emily showed this early on, but I think the biggest thing that I want to point out here is we have 2 public workshops coming up. We are starting to advertise, and they are February 21st and 22nd, and we'll do one in the middle of the day and one in the evening. We're going to advertise via social. We're going to send you all e-blasts. It's all going to start coming out today. And, as for our friends at the city, we'll also send you our social ads so you can repost them. So we will hope that you do that. But a lot of the content that's going to be in the meeting for the public will be what you're seeing today. We want to bring a lot of this to them and get feedback. So don't expect them to receive new information. That's not the plan. But honestly, anything you can do, send me an email. Most of you know my email, but if you have any last minute advice on advertising and getting the word out, or I'll note that they both are virtual via Zoom. So one's at noon and the other is at 6 p.m. All right. And so Emily already talked about all of this other stuff, so I'm not going to go into that. And then, our public meetings were here. So again, our big next step, we will continue to do stakeholder outreach. If you feel there are members of the community, particularly neighborhood groups, organizations, reach out to us and let us know we should be talking to them. I did hear from someone at our last PAC meeting that we should be talking to Shippen, and we have done a little bit of back and forth with them, and trying to figure out if they might be good representatives on the PAC. That's in their court at this point. But again, we're doing our regular website, social media, we'll do the e-bulletins for the public meeting. And we have our regular stuff that we typically do. So for the public meetings, again, a lot of the same content that you're seeing here today. So we don't want you to get a little bit nervous. We want you to really kind of absorb what you're hearing today and feeling comfortable about it. Talk to the people that you know in your community, get them to come to the meeting, speak up. It's this purpose and need. Let's get this wrapped up as much as we can. The universe of alternatives, these were some, it's a lot to absorb. And then the stuff on the local roads. Again, each meeting will be the exact same content. We're just doing it 2 different times. So go to our website. The login information to register is there. We are still asking people to register. Just because it helps us track staffing on our end, and it also it provides one extra level of security for Zoom meetings. So we appreciate you going through that extra step. So maybe if you need to register at 5:55, take that extra 5 minutes and do it, and we definitely appreciate it. So with that, I don't see any hands raised. I'm going to turn it back to John, and now we are just planning an open discussion.
Okay, thanks, Marcy. Francis, appreciate the publication and sharing that. We're certainly interested in incorporating innovative solutions wherever we can that will fit the context and the restrictions that we have on rights of way and development in the area. But again, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? I know we kind of. Oh, go ahead, Francis.
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to get into this in future presentations, but is there going to be consideration given to creating more of a connected local road network, such as what was done on the I-84 project in Waterbury? I don't know how much traffic in 95 is, internal to Stamford. People jump on, jump off to get across town. But to the extent we can keep those cars off the freeway, it could help address flow problems.
Yeah, that certainly is something to consider. I know we do also have some other unique situations where folks are kind of doing the opposite, where they're getting off onto North State Street to jump queues that are on the highway. So it's kind of a balancing act where we certainly want to facilitate those connections within the city to reduce trips on the highway, and yet find ways to kind of keep folks from diverting onto local streets to avoid congestion on the main line. Angelo, go ahead.
Yeah.
Hi, Angelo again. I read an article a couple days ago in the Stanford Advocate, as some others on this call might have, talking about the CTDOT considering implementing quote unquote quiet pavement onto I-95 in Greenwich and Stamford. They say that will help reduce some of the noise pollution in the area. And so I was just sort of wondering if that is also being considered for this project as well.
Sure. Yeah, good question. Yeah, so down in Greenwich, the department is going to be resurfacing I-95 with a different type of pavement mix than what we've used in the past in the state. So I do want to say that it is primarily being used for its performance. It does have some properties which do decrease the noise coming off the vehicle's tires, which is the main generator of highway noise. But it's a limited benefit, 2 to 3 decibels is what we've found. So I do want to stress that it's not recognized as a noise abatement measure, but certainly pending the results on how it goes in Greenwich, it may be used elsewhere across the state. can't say it'll be used here yet for sure, but certainly we'll be looking at noise impacts as I think we mentioned before, earlier meetings, but when we get into the NEPA phase, that National Environmental Policy Act, for any projects that do come out of the study, they will be evaluated for noise impacts, assuming they meet the criteria to do so.
Okay, thank you. Just because I know that noise pollution is a genuine concern in the areas near I-95.
Absolutely.
Mark,
Mark, go ahead.
I have a question about the I-95 redesign, and it might not be at a stage where, I'm sorry, exit 9 redesign. That's the exit I would get on and get off. I'm a little confused by the drawing, how I would get on. It seems like that circle would be potentially taken out and there would be just a ramp. And I'm trying to figure out, depending on which direction you are on US Route 1, how you would get on. You know, I saw the one on ramp. I didn't see another one. So is that still in discussion and thinking, or what's happening with it?
Yeah. So I don't know if Marcy, you can go back to that graphic just to talk to it, but as Mark said, this is again one of the conceptual
which
solutions
one
that we
was it?
presented. Yeah,
That-
There you go. Oh, just went
That
by.
one?
No,
No,
one
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 more.
more.
the other way.
Sorry,
Oh.
yeah, go forward.
Sorry. That one. That one.
There
Right
you
there.
go. That's it.
All
Okay.
right.
So in this scenario, again, we haven't really studied this in depth yet, but in this scenario, if you were going, it would kind of be the opposite from what it is now. So
Mhm.
if you're going east on Route 1, in this scenario, you'd take a left to get on the highway and you'd have
I
a
see.
right hand going the other way.
Okay.
Right. We'll have to look at that because,
Yeah.
you know, it may cause problems to have people turning left from Route 1 to get onto 95, you know, going in that direction. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of room to keep both ramps and kind of bring them together, kind of like what we showed before. You bring the two ramps together and they go onto the highway as one. But, you know, we're going to have to look at to make sure the traffic on Route 1 isn't negatively impacted by whatever we do here. So
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Because I can see going, I guess, west toward Greenwich on Route 1. That would be a hard ride, like a 270-degree or more turn to get on, and the other on your right would be a left turn into whatever traffic is happening on Route 1 at that moment. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
thanks. Lyle, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. So, I live in the Cove. I take Seaside Avenue a lot, and quite often it backs up so that you can't get past the off ramp to get to Route 1. So I don't think that would ever be a good idea, because we would have backups that would have you sitting at that light for maybe 3 changes of the light. I'm not sure how many people here have, use Seaside Avenue often, but quite often you're backed up 2 light changes there on the off ramp at 9, trying to get to Route 1 and then across Route 1 to Cortlandt Avenue. It is already a problem, so I think that would exacerbate that problem. That's what I got.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you for that. Certainly the local perspective always helps. And yeah, this is just a really complex intersection and interchange. So there'll have to be a lot of analysis that goes into it, any changes that we contemplate here. Any other questions on the slides on the local roadway approach, or just general thoughts? Okay, well, yeah, I don't want to keep everybody. I know we're running into over noon here, past noon, so we can hang out certainly for a little while and answer any other questions. But otherwise, again, thank you so much for your attendance today, joining us in the middle of your workday or whatever you have going on. And we hope to see you at the public information meeting. And as Marcy mentioned, please do get the word out if you can. Let people know they can come and learn more and make sure their
Wait.
voice is heard.
John, Heather's raising her hand.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
Oh, hi, Heather.
Thank you so much for the presentation and so forth. I do have a question. It's kind of related but unrelated to this. We had an incident here yesterday in Stamford. I'm not sure if you're aware of it or now, where all of the on and exit ramps had to be shut down on 95 in Stamford. Unfortunately, there was a homicide in New Jersey, and the suspect who drove here actually died of a self-inflicted gunshot. But it created so much chaos because there was no, and I've reached out to the city about this too, because there was no alerts, there was no way to let people know that there was no way to get on and off the highway. I don't know if there's, like I said, it's completely separate from this, but it does impact that because I got caught in that whole mess. It was a nightmare, like trying to get from Darien to back to Stamford. I ended up in Greenwich and ended up all over the place for well over an hour. I get for the safety reasons why everything was closed. But I don't know, is there an alert system or anything like that that goes out like the state does in a case like that where like every ramp is closed?
Yeah, I'm sorry for your experience. I did not hear about that. I know on the highway we have variable messaging that's used where our operations folks can put messages. I'm not sure if that was done, but certainly that is.
I mean, it was quite impactful to see how it
Yeah.
impacted, and that's obviously a city issue, but the ramps, 7 was closed, 8 was closed, both sides of the highway were closed, because they were trying to locate the suspect, which they finally did. And then, like I said, under where Canal Street is decided and Trester Boulevard decided to take his own life. But it just impacted everything, as far as 95 goes. And where I got on in Darien, there were no signage, but I got on right at the time when it first happened, because I've seen the timeline and so forth. But going back to your project and merging and taking out Elm Street and putting that straightaway between those two exits, I think is very impactful as well, because you have that straightaway because people are coming on and people are going off, at the same time, and that whole congestion right there appears to be because there's, I believe you said 900 feet apart those two exits are, and so they're so close, but yet they cause so much congestion there as well. And then you have more development too, that's coming on the east side. You have new apartments coming that are being built, the Lafayette, which is right adjacent to 95. So you're going to have more people living in the area and so forth. So I think as a whole, as the east side, is redeveloped and West Main Street and that whole area, it's just something to kind of keep in mind as we keep continually growing in Stamford immensely, I would say. And I do like where you put the lanes where it's more people not exiting off of 95, where it's more speed lanes, I think is what you called it. And so to get traffic progressively going through, because this is, as someone mentioned, such a high usage area of freight trucks, and cargo and transportation for all of New England coming through here. And if you would like to share with me too, Marcy, your meeting information, I'd be glad to share it. I'm sorry I cannot attend. We have a major event on the 22nd, and we'll be involved in the preparations on the 21st. But if you'd like me to send it out, so that the business community, depending, I would think they'd be very interested in seeing how this is going to impact how you get to their destination.
I'll reach out today, Heather. Thank you.
Okay, I'd be happy to share that.
All right. So I do have
So just to add
I
just wanted to add to some of Heather's comments. Thanks again for the comments. So in regards to the situation yesterday, the incident, typically, so we have our Bridgeport Operations Center, and they're in contact with state police. And state police obviously should be in contact with the local enforcement. So as soon as they get word, I mean, they usually do post those messages. Unfortunately, I don't know, maybe it was delayed at that time until they got that message, but that's usually the case, right? The emergency personnel are all talking to each other.
But how do you get it to the drivers is my thing. You know what I mean? Like, I got stuck in the thick of it, and it was like, once I was in it, it was hard to get out. You know what I mean? And where I got on, they didn't have the signage where I got on in the Darien exit from the meeting. So, there was no way of knowing, but the state police presence was huge. I mean, between the state police were basically the ones that had blocked off most of the highways at Stanford Police. I mean, it was a high intense search and situation. Yeah. So, you have this random person walking down the street where they found him with a gun. It's I don't know. Like I said, I'm going to talk more to public safety here as well. But I would think with something to this magnitude that impacted 95 and in the city, that there's some way, whether it's text messages or some way that people could sign on to something for security.
So there is an alert system on our website, on the DOT. I think it's the travel information page. If you sign up, you can get alerts for incidences. So that is available on our website.
Is that something you could send to me and I could share? Because I had board members calling me, I had businesses calling me, and I'm like, I know it's something serious. There's caution tape everywhere because it happened kind of close in the vicinity where I live. But any information like that I can pass.
We can get that to you. Yep.
Yeah, and I'll share it out in one of our newsletters. We send them out twice a week. That would be great.
And then following up on some of the comments about the East End and, in terms, I think the team has been meeting with the city, and we've had a couple of different meetings in terms of even with economic development, I think, and planning, in terms of trying to take a look at some of this development that's coming in, making sure that we're informed so we know, in terms of our planning purposes. So I'll just throw this out to the team, our team. Are we aware of the Lafayette, the East End, new apartment building and the location of that?
It's being built right now. It's right next to BevMax. You can see it actually from the highway. If you're looking down, you can see it's a large apartment building.
Okay.
We are aware of that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Because they had interest too, adjacent to the property, which is under 95, about potentially working with the state. And I know they've had discussions with Carlo and with the city and with my board, about putting in some sort of park. And I know there's a lot of restrictions due to the nature of where it is, the proximity right under 95, and if something were to fall and things like that. So I know that's been in discussion as well. But it's nice to see some redevelopment in a positive way, on the east side, and more coming, I think, on the west side too, as downtown explodes pretty much right now. But thank you very much for the update and the presentation. I appreciate it.
All right. Anything else, Neil?
I see.
We do have Phil raising his hand, so I want to get on. He's been raising it for a few minutes. Phil?
Don't worry, my arm's not tired. Who would be a contact me to just reach out to with respect to the accessibility portion, and especially as mentioned before, when the construction is being done around the sidewalks and they're either being redeveloped or redesigned or blocked for construction to make sure that the current standards are being met with respect to the accessible notifications. If there's a street sign, again, saying that sidewalk is closed or roadway is closed, the new standards require an audible signage for someone who's blind or visually impaired to know that the sidewalk is either blocked or not there currently during construction. Who would be the right person? Do you have someone from the DOT ADA coordinator's office part of this process, or how can I make sure I get information to the right people?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we're some ways off from any construction happening that's related to this study. So, we can kind of take note of that. We do have folks that are involved in the department with the complete streets. Like you mentioned, we have the ADA coordinator. As we talked about before, we have this new complete streets directive that we're following. So there's certainly quite an interdisciplinary approach now for these things. And then, like I mentioned, when it gets into construction, we'll have the inspectors there. So there will be a few layers of places where we can potentially coordinate that. But again, the construction's a little bit.
Wow.
Any of these short-term projects could be, and depending on their project specifics, 2 to 3 years out at least from being in construction.
Okay. All right. Very good. I'll just keep on it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, well, yeah, again, we can hang out for a couple more minutes, but we can maybe formally adjourn the meeting now. Thank you again so much for all the comments and discussion and for your time today. So hopefully we'll see you at the public info.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Luke.
All right, well, I think everybody